Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our interactive live broadcast on rail cybersecurity in an automated world. And I think, as we all know from watching the news and the geopolitical events that are happening around us at the moment, we know that cybersecurity is a real hot button topic, and the rail and metro sector is no exception to this. I'm Nick Kingsley. I'm the managing editor of Railway Gazette International, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this afternoon's debate, which will go on for about the next hour or so. As the rail and metro industry moves towards more automation for greater efficiency and control, this transition also comes with an increased risk of cyber threats and cybersecurity incidents. In today's discussion, we'll be assessing how railways should address the risks around cybersecurity and automation. ATO is becoming an increasingly standard element of metro operations, I should say, but it's also starting to migrate into the mainline world, and we'll be getting some insights into that from our panelists today. So in a couple of minutes' time, we're going to have a short presentation from our sponsor, Cylus, the cybersecurity specialist, who are very kindly sponsoring today's discussion. But to start with, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Dimitri van Santvliet, the Chief Information Security Officer at Dutch national operator NS. We have Jack Schneider, the Head of International Standardization for ATO and CCS on board at Swiss Federal Railways. Stefan Calais, Head of CCS Innovation at SNCF Réseau. And Mickey Schiffman, the co-founder and Chief Technology Officer at Cylus. So we've already received quite a lot of questions, and I'm sure those of you who've watched the Railway Gazette's interactive live broadcast before will know. Please do submit your questions in the feed that you can see on the screen in front of you, and I'll do my best to pose as many of the questions as I can over the course of the next hour. And I think we'll have a really fruitful and insightful discussion. But to kick things off, I'm going to hand over to Mickey, who's just going to give us a very short presentation from Cylus, just looking at some of the topics around cybersecurity and automation, especially in the metro sector. So Mickey, over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Nick. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here, and thank you for Railway Gazette for hosting us, and thank you for the co-panelists participating. I'm looking forward to a very fruitful discussion about this important topic, which is the increased automation and cybersecurity in rail. So for today in the agenda, we will discuss automated train operation, some benefits that automation brings to train operation, different types of grade of automation that exist in the rail world, simple threats that such automated systems have. And we will also introduce you a little bit of Cylus One and discuss some takeaways that we have from those slides. Myself, I'm Mickey Schiffman. I'm a CTO and co-founder at Cylus. And today I will be happy to discuss all those topics with you. So let's start with a fact. So today, 48% of the world's metro lines are fully automated or in the process of building to be fully automated. And the idea is that train automation took over the railway industry very seriously, both in the metro and the mainline world. So in the metro, the technology already exists for a while. In mainline, it's a bit more complicated because of all the open fields and the need to travel over very large geographical distances. But automation is now a key part of any railway system that is being built. Automation can be very advanced, but it can be also very simple. And we cannot imagine the future of the railways without advanced automation. And that's also part of what we need to make the railway more and more competitive. So the benefits of train automations are relatively straightforward. They include, increased availability and frequency of trains, of course. It eliminates human error. So the more we have automation on our trains, the more safe the trains might be, as well as the less room for human error exists because machines can take over it. And it also improves passenger comfort because of the ability to plan braking curves and different things like that. So you have trains that are more efficient, that are most likely more safe, and also more comfortable for passengers and also for freight and cargo. When we discuss automation, we always have this grades of automation notion. So the grade of automation 0, which is basically no automation, is trains as we were used to have mostly in the past or nowadays, but only like in trainway typically. So these are on trains that are driving on site and they're rely basically on the train driver for any type of operation. Another aspect of train automation is grade of automation 1, which is manual. It's where the driver can control all the different types of operation in the train. So they're becoming more digital, but still under the full control of the driver. Grade of automation 2, which is the most or the more common type of grade of automation, is that where train stopping and starting and stopping of train is automated, but the driver still needs to operate the door, still needs to drive the train when it's needed and handle emergencies. That's, I think, the first level that we consider automated in terms of when we say ATO. Grade of automation 3 is already driverless. So when I say driverless, it means that you don't need a driver. You can already use an attendant, a train attendant, and they can operate the doors. They can drive the train in case of emergencies. You have someone that can still take over. And grade of automation 4, which is the holy grail of train automation, is when you don't need anyone and you don't need crew to operate the train, at least not on the train itself. And you also have other plugins to those systems like platform screen doors that ensures that passengers and the stations are remaining safe and not interfering with the train movement. So in order to get from this grade of automation 0 to grade of automation 4, there is a need to incorporate many different technologies. You need to have controls or digital controls for basically every aspect of the train. So this can be the braking system, can be the traction system, can be the door control units. All of them must be automated. Other than that, you need to have advanced ability to control it from the wayside and high level of harmony and synchronization. So you need to have an ability to ensure that automated trains are actually can coexist and they can that they will not turn into unsafe situations. So that's part of the safety systems that are mostly introduced already in grade of automation 1. And other than that, it improves efficiency once you have an ability also to operate the train in specific speeds or ensure that the network is highly efficient and sometimes is also energy efficient. So those grade of automation that we look from the outside and see how like the train operation changes, it also has huge impact in terms of how much technology you need to incorporate into the trains and into the wayside systems to ensure the safe and efficient driving. ATO systems, they have some cost or hidden costs in terms of cybersecurity. And usually as a cybersecurity person, when I see a system that has technology incorporated to such level that you can have trains without any drivers, you understand that there is a cost to that. And it means that probably there are some very, let's say, promiscuous communication systems. You have an ability to use a computer or a controller to actually change the speed of the train. You have the ability to open doors. And examples to what can happen relies on the fact that train speed can be controlled by wireless commands. Reduced headways mean you need to respond quicker to any incident, and thus also to cyber incident. Door opening can be also executed by remote command, especially in the very crowded metro systems that can result in loss of safety. And you don't have any staff on board that can respond to cyber threats. So it means that probably if there is some incident, you need to operate it from the back office. And sometimes it means that, again, you don't have enough time to respond, or you don't have people that can actually make the first reaction or diagnose the problem. And platform screen doors are additional component that usually connected to the signaling systems. They also become vulnerable to threats. and they also become essential in order to make this all harmonized system work properly. And the key thing to remember here is that increased automation requires increased cybersecurity. So it might be that the trains are very similar, but all the technology that is now being added as an overlay is making them more exposed to cyber threats. So we cannot think about them as we thought about trains in the past that were more mechanical, less automated, etc. So for that, at Silos, what we're doing is that we look at this whole automation problem and other challenges that are part of the digitization of the railway industry. And we went to develop products that will help automated trains and automated infrastructure to become more secure. And we developed the Silos product portfolio. It includes Silos 1 for onboard protection, for signaling and infrastructure protection. And today I will also share some information about what we do at Silos, and later on we can move to the discussion about generally the cybersecurity of automated system. So at Silos, what we provide is several cybersecurity capabilities within Silos 1. We help with asset management or visibility. So it's automated cyber asset discovery is being used in order to discover all the assets in the network. The more automated the trains are, the more assets you have that are digital and are used for safety critical and operation critical functions. We help with threat detection. So our real-time threat detection ensures that in real time, the operators of the trains, the ones that are located in the back office, will be able to discover threats in a real time when they happen, also on board and wayside. So it means that if the trains are now being under attack, you can have this additional level of cybersecurity and understand where the threats are and how to investigate them. We help with railway security operations. So that's a key part of what we do, is actually bridging this gap between discovering the threats and how do you actually respond to them in the real world. And in the real world, you have constraints that are related to operation. And we help in segmenting the system. So actually, it's quite an interesting use case because typically the ATO systems and the ATP systems are in different levels of safety, but they are typically connected to each other. And many times we see that customer networks which implement ATO, they don't have proper segmentation between the ATO systems and the ATP systems because even though they're considering a different safety level and one system can be SEAL 4 and the other one can be SEAL 2, those systems are still connected to each other because cybersecurity wasn't part of the initial design. And that's something that is now also not part of railway standards. But when you look at the cybersecurity of the system, you need to make sure that those systems are properly segmented because they can have a different impact on the systems, on the railway systems and the availability on the safety of the railway systems. From the previous slides, what I would like to give as a few key takeaways is that cybersecurity must be infused into train automation procedures. So when you increase the automation, when you use any type of automated system within your rail network, you need to include cybersecurity inside because otherwise the system is now exposed to a new type of threats. When you look at grade of automation and you make changes in the procedures of how trains are operated, you also need to have the adequate cybersecurity requirements. And the more the system is automated, the more you need to have security requirements that are more comprehensive and implemented. And we believe that railways also should develop best practices to tackle the interplay between cybersecurity and automation. Currently, those are not necessarily exist, but we believe that this should be also related. And this things is happening in transit, it's happening in mainline system. Now it's actually a good turning point in the mainline world because ATO systems are being more and more developed in the mainline world. You have much less automated systems at the moment, but in the future, probably our rails will rely on that. So that will be a good time to already start thinking about what's going to happen in the future. And I'm sure my co-panelists will also discuss it because they're in the leading edge of those developments. Other than that, we all need to remember that automation comes with the need of cybersecurity. And when we think automation, we must cover it with the proper cybersecurity plan. So those were my slides. Thank you very much. Nick, the floor goes back to you, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mickey. That was a really good little kind of intro session, just a quick presentation there, just setting the scene and really getting into some of the key questions that we're going to be looking to answer over the next 45 minutes or so. So as I said at the top of the broadcast, please do get your questions in the feed, and we'll try and get through as many of those as we can. But I'm now going to turn to each of our panelists in turn and just get them to kind of give their initial thoughts on today's topic and perhaps answer a couple of initial questions. Mickey, I'm going to come back to you to start with. Thank you for your slides. You mentioned infusing cybersecurity into the rail automation process. You know, how should railways be thinking, or how should the rail industry consider how best to do that? Is it through kind of industry working groups internally within the sector, or is it through kind of external regulation and more development of standards that are perhaps coming from government or through the European TSIs, if you're looking at European mainline rail, for example?
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you, Nick, for the question. So I think that all approaches are relatively valid. What we're seeing at the moment is that on one hand, you have techniques or procedures that are developed specifically in specific rail companies. On the other hand, you sometimes have standards that are built in working groups. In my opinion, the main thing to consider is how you make it practical as much as possible, because one of the challenges in standard development is that those processes take time. Sometimes it takes between 3 to 5 years to develop like a proper standard and getting it adopted by the industry. But unfortunately, cybersecurity is much faster than that. And the cyber threat landscape is much faster. So like when we go into this process of developing standards, we need to make sure that people are engaged enough to make it ready and available on a certain point that is much more timely than some other developments that are happening. And in my opinion, what is key is to have the right people around the table, is to have the right decision-making power around the table, and also the right cadence in making it happening and get it ready. Because railway standard can be developed over 5 years. We don't have 5 years for that. Companies are being attacked at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think whenever we talk about digitalization in rail in its widest form, the relatively kind of long-term nature of the railway business always kind of rubs up against the rapid change that we see in the digital and technology sectors. That's a key point. Thank you, Mickey. Dimitri, I'll turn to you then to just give us a perspective of somebody. You're relatively new, as I understand it, to the rail sector, and relatively new to NS, the Dutch operator. So just give us your initial feelings and findings. What have you discovered as a cyber expert who's come into the rail sector in your first few months?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Nicky, for your presentation. That was very comprehensive. I think I agreed to most of it. Being new to the sector, I also discovered that in rail, you know, you have this long-term contracts, like sometimes for 30 years. And if you look at the threat landscape is the pace is speeding. It's now, for example, if you look at ransomware, you have a $1 billion business out there that is aiming for your assets. So you need to act quickly. The threat landscape is evolving every year. The pace is extremely fast. And if you also look at the rolling stock and trackside systems that have IT, OT, and you know, many of those components now have an IP address, and things can propagate just around and be contagious. If you look at the geopolitics, things are vital. Industries are being targeted at the moment. And if New York Metro is being aimed at, it can just spread out to the rest of the railway business. So I think if you look, being new to the sector, I think there's a bit of a delta between the pace outside in the threat landscape and inside in the sector. And I think we're catching up on that, and we should.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dimitri. Important points there, and I'll say from our own point of view here in the trade media, you know, we've seen major European rail operators putting out press releases about cyber incidents and cyber threats even within the last week. So again, can't stress enough how topical and live an issue this is. I'm going to turn to Stefan Calais from SNCF. Stefan, there have been some regulatory changes and some government policy shifts in France that have. How have those changes and new laws and new regulations impacted on the French rail sector, and how is cybersecurity being worked into the regulation of the rail sector in France?
Hello, Nikki. Hello also to all the people connected. Yes, in fact, in the last decade and maybe less, there were some huge change in the, let's say, in the regulatory framework in France, but for sure, so in the rest of the countries. Everything started with identifying, let's say, vital activities like, of course, energy, water, and transportation. And we also, as an operator, we are considered as OVI, an operator of vital importance. And there was a white paper in 2013. Which led to the first, let's say, regulation rule at national level in France. This was what we call the Loi de Programmation Militaire, I would translate in a military programmation law. And this is also taken into account at the government level because of the importance of all these activities and services, including mobility. It goes quite fast just after this white paper, because at the end of this same year, 2013, the law was pronounced, and I would say with our national regulator regarding cybersecurity, which is called the ANSSI, this was enforced just a few months and a few years after, fully operational in 2016 typically. So yes, it's not a long story from now on, but it has been identified as a major topic. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's in a moment we'll perhaps come back and discuss a little bit some of the automation projects that are underway in France as well, and in the passenger rail. And I know as well there are some trials around rail automation of locomotives in France. But just looking at, I'll turn to Jack Schneider now. Just tell us a little bit about Swiss Federal Railways and its rail automation program, because you're one of the railways, along with the French and the Dutch, who are at the forefront of moving ATO out of the metro environment and into the mainline environment, as we touched on at the start of the broadcast. Just give us a summary, Jack, of how cybersecurity fits into that program.
Thank you very much. Cybersecurity is one of the hot topic. As we have heard from Nikki, thanks Nikki for your presentation, it is depending on the grade of automation. As long as we have a driver in a train and we have some attack, we can really do something, because the train driver is thinking. He has his knowledge what could be and what could not be. As long as we go in the direction of the GO3 and 4, there will be one of the key elements will be the cybersecurity. For cybersecurity in Europe, there are many different groups looking for standards, looking for dedicated verification and so on. And this is one of the topic of the whole specification work of the GO3 and 4 under the umbrella of Shift to Rail. There is another group for safety, there is a group for cybersecurity, and presently still we have not finished the logical architecture, the interfaces. We still start to look about the cybersecurity. But nevertheless, I will come back to a general statement to the railways. In Switzerland, the FOT has already a few years ago decided to any changes of any system, we have to make a note on the cybersecurity aspects. It means not only for the ATP and ATO, this means for all things, like for the passenger information, for some diagnostic things and so on. And this is something that we have heard before from Nikki, that we have to be very careful that we do not overlook the backdoors. Today, we connect more and more systems in train from the central from the train control centers, but we have to be sure that not only the safety systems will be protected, also all interfaces and all developments need a cybersecurity aspect.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Jack. And I think we've all seen, over recent years, we've seen the images in the media of passenger information screens at railway stations being disrupted and going blank, and the challenges that can pose. So we know that it affects the sort of non-vital aspects of railway technology, but obviously there's also a challenge around signalling and train control as we move towards ATO. Stefan, do you have any kind of comments on what Jack has said there from SNCF's perspective? I mean, you are working on a number of train automation projects, and we know that there are, in the mainline world, there is a desire to perhaps to have a greater level of automation as we develop ERTMS and CBTC on some of the suburban lines around Paris. What's your experience of keeping up with the cybersecurity requirements as those projects advance?
Yes, I completely subscribe to Jack's rationale. Let's say we have also in France introduced the GOA4 on mass transit in the urban metro lines in the 90s with fully automation and automated systems. And yes, at that period, cybersecurity was not really an issue. All the networks from the wayside to the train, including the one, let's say, federating all the equipment from signaling system trackside, were more or less very proprietary, not that much connected to the outside world. So a sign of closed circuit, not a CCTV, but a CC ATP ATO system, let's say, so closed circuit, and no real threat at this period of time. It's 20, 30 years ago. I said yes. In the last decade, we have introduced these new laws with new regulators, and exactly as for the FOT in Switzerland, we have a similar, let's say, requirements for this introduction of the system. Typically, with our major GOA2 project in the mass transit operated by SNCF in Paris, the east-west bound EOL line, we have started the project before or prior to these laws and to this regulation rules, and we had to introduce in the activities and in the design architecture phase, in the solutions, and also in our organization, beside in parallel, not specifically for this project, but for all projects in general, for the organization, to introduce the cybersecurity aspects. And this is very important because it takes time, it costs money, of course, but it's mandatory, and not mandatory just by law, but it's mandatory for the service and for the operation we perform. So we have to, let's say, have the right people, the right staff at the different levels, either for the architectural teams, talking with the suppliers about the solutions, and also, but on operational aspect, having the SOC, let's say, and all the activities performed by the staff also in charge of monitoring the system and providing also the correct answer in case of attack or whatever the threat.
Thank you, Stefan. And at that point, I am going to make a small plug for the latest April issue of Railway Gazette International, which has a big feature about the EOL extension of the commuter rail network in Paris. So do check that out via our website if you are interested in that project. I'm now going to turn to some of the questions that have come in from the audience, and I'm perhaps go back to Mickey and to Dimitri, perhaps may have a view on this. We've had a question from Japan, so we're stepping outside of Europe. We're going to go from East Japan Railway in Tokyo, asking about the rise of 5G-based telecoms, voice and data communications, and obviously the increasing bandwidth and the increasingly ubiquitous use of IP and 5G telecoms, IP-based telecoms, and also 5G-based telecoms. And the JR East is saying, we are worried about the level of separation you can have between these different data transfer networks and they are concerned about hacking from the separation of different networks and different functions within their systems. Mickey, and I'll turn to you first. Do you have a view on that specifically, and then perhaps Dimitri as well afterwards?
Yeah. Cool. So thanks for the question. So typically in those networks, and it's including 5G, the basics are very important, and the basics are many times relying on, you need to see what's going on in the system, you need to map it properly, and you need to have some detection capabilities when something is happening, and sometimes even response, because 5G is not necessarily used for safety critical links. So it really depends on what is it used for. I would look at, of course, on application partitioning, because typically the advantage of 5G is the ability to carry and transfer different types of data over the same link. So what we was used to have trains in the past, or even in the present, are used to have multiple links that are used for multiple applications. And the more 5G is being used, the more convergence is going to happen. And then the partitioning of the applications will be key, and the proper way of configuring it will be important. And as an operator, you also need to get visibility on what's happening in your network and to ensure your security is proper. And that's something as well to consider. So 5G is great, it's great technology, but also like you need to accompany it with the proper security. And that's probably like, it's kind of like also the message of what I said earlier, and it also affects 5G as well.
Thank you, Mickey. Dimitri, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I tend to agree. So 5G, I think, is actually another addition, another layer on your attack surface, and you should look at all the attack vectors. And I think that's also the way that our architects and cybersecurity experts are looking into these new technologies. So if I can give a small example, we have looked at the grade of automation levels. Our signaling in the Netherlands is divided in 3 different brands, or brands, the same brand, different evolutions, so to say. So we made a matrix and we looked at all the threat possibilities. We looked at the threat modeling. So we used stride models, for example, to look at those different attack vectors, and then try to find commonalities. And one of the mitigations that we came up with, or the technologists came up with, is the security application in the train. So we are trying to find a way to segment those networks in the train to see if there's any anomaly patterns going on, and 5G will just be a part of that if 5G is being used in the train. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Yeah. That's. I think the key there then is to be aware of this trend towards perhaps fewer individual subsystems on board trains, particularly, and greater convergence around certain technologies such as 5G or IP-based networks, but to ensure that there is proper segmentation within those subsystems. Another question we've had, and I'm happy to take responses from any of the panelists, is about white hat activity, which correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of ethical hacking and that kind of thing. We've had a question from a viewer saying, is this something the railway industry and metro sector should be deploying? And perhaps what are the pros and cons of doing so? Dimitri, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, sure. I think white hat and red teaming is just one way of testing your systems. And I think if you want to catch a thief, you need to think like one. And that's exactly what our red team is doing as well. So as I said before, you don't only try to hack your systems, you always also do it in a theoretical way with threat modeling. You need to shift left. When you are designing your systems, the red team people are involved in making abuse cases, looking at how ways to attack your systems. And then in the end, you try to at least once every year or every 2 years see if there's any loopholes to be found in the systems. So I think also looking at IPv4, IPv6, you know, there's new. It's not only 5G; it's also new double-stacked IP ranges that you need to be prepared for. So yeah, I think red teaming is crucial.
Mm. Nikki, what would your view be on that? Is that you know, should that be part of the rail or infrastructure manager's armory?
Yeah. So, in my opinion, yes, it should be. As Dimitri mentioned, that's a very it's a very good tool to test the security of systems. I think that the main challenge that companies face is how do you do it properly without interfering with the train movement, and especially when some things can cause loss of liability from the vendor and might be more complicated. I must say that we had experience in the past that we did it, and you can find different environments to do it, or you can simulate some of them, you can complement some of them, you can use labs, and you can also use real equipment in specific times. Really depends on the life cycle of the equipment. So you can do all of it. But in my opinion, yes, it's also very important for seeing the real problems, because sometimes when you have lots of papers, you can look at them as just papers, and you can see a risk, and no one will actually be able to prove if it's right or not or wrong. Some will say it is, some will say it's not. From our experience, showing is much better than telling. So when you can show something like that, also when you approach management, or you approach your vendors, or you approach your suppliers, any of those, having the ability to have proof points is super important, and those proof points are sometimes better shown when you actually do the testing and the red teaming or white hacking.
Okay, thank you very much. We've had a couple of questions that perhaps go back towards the railway specific aspects of this discussion, so I'll come to Stefan and then to Jack. With this one, we've had a question in from a rail accident investigator who says, you know, the fail-safe principle is fundamental to the safe operations of railways, and has been, you know, throughout really the history of the railway industry, and certainly around, you know, signalling and then, you know, a very highly developed accident investigation process in many countries. How do you ensure, he asks, that a cyber attack has a fail-safe response? Is that something that is achievable? Jack, do you have a view on that? And perhaps I'll come to Stefan afterwards.
Yeah, I have a feel of that. First, I think we need always some intelligent systems who can work independent of any connectivity to protect and to be ensured that we have the safety level. As an example, for the perception system that we have, we need a perception system on a train. We cannot remotely, without perception system and automatic detection of obstacle or what else, make a remote operation of trains. It will not go. The second point is we have to test a lot of things, but we have also to protect and to take into account that we have not only one specific connectivity from a train to a system, we have a lot of them. We have the ATP. We have later on the automation, ATO. We have the passenger information. We have some diagnostic. And if we can combine and make a backup solution to not only make a backup connectivity, make a safe connectivity, we can really do a lot in this field.
Stefan, do you have a view on that?
Yes, also completely agree with Jack, and back to the safety and the question, of course, safety in a railway as the safety regarding, let's say, a cyber threat is a question of mitigation of a risk. It was also stated that in the world of cybersecurity, many things happens and evolve rapidly. Let's say, as Dimitri talked from the pace of the threat, let's say, and I completely agree with this image. In the railway safety or conventional, let's say, a safety approach we are more or less in a kind of frozen threat of the conventional railway hazard regarding overspeed, regarding derailment, and things like that. And with the cybersecurity, the safety approach is again based on the risk analysis and the risk and mitigation of risk analysis, but it seems that the environment, which sees the hackers and all the threats, is evolving much more faster than let's say the conventional railway risk as we are normally tackling. And as said also before by other speakers, yes. Some rules or good design according to this hazard analysis and this risk analysis lead to mitigate the risk in the best we can. It's difficult to talk in this case from a fail-safe design as we do in the conventional railway. If you have a relay-based interlocking, you can ensure by a fail-safe design that if you do not have the 24 volts power supply, then your relay drops, and if it drops, then the signal turns to red, and so on and so on. So it's really a fail-safe design. For the cybersecurity, I will not dare to talk about fail-safe design, but more from a mitigation and robust mitigation of the risk. Saying that, and this also was said by Jack, we have always to think about, yes, and I did my best for mitigating the risk, but it happens and the threat is there. So we have also to think about, but it's true also for conventional railway operation, but before the cyber risk, let's say, to think about what are the B plan, how do I overcome and how do I cope with this risk? For a conventional railway operator, if we lose, for instance, the catenary or overhead lines, let's say, we have to think about how to reroute the traffic, the trains, and other tracks, other routes, and so on. Same for the cyber. It's a question also of a B plan. It's a little bit more complex, maybe because the consequences of it has to be clearly assessed and evaluated, of course, and therefore also B plan to be accordingly proposed.
Yeah, that's we've had a couple of broadcasts in the past looking at cybersecurity, and that message actually came through. I recall quite clearly in those discussions. It was these threats are real and incidents will happen, so you have to have a plan. You can't say there will be no incidents. Dimitri, just give us your view, perhaps, as somebody coming into the rail sector. How have you found that it's almost a clash of cultures, really, between the technology sector, where you talk about risk mitigation, threat modeling, versus traditional railway safety, which is very, as Stefan says, very rigid, very much, this is safe, this is not safe, quite a binary kind of a world. How have you found that, the difference there?
Yeah, I think there's a difference to be seen, but also a lot of similarities. And if you look at NS, for example, they've been driving trains for 180 years and 2 years. I think we can learn. So cybersecurity is a relatively new safety domain. Within NS, we have 8 safety domains, and we just joined. So we can learn a lot if we look at the control frameworks that our safety colleagues use, physical safety, for example. There's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot to understand how you can, embed your controls into those processes. So we talk a lot and we learn a lot, and indeed our sector, our domain is the pace is not similar to the physical domain, but I think it's also converging a little bit. If you look at, for example, terrorist threats, if you look at insider threats, they are all a bit similar with the physical, the things that our colleagues are monitoring. Also, if you look at, for example, the IT part, so our IT colleagues have a SOC SIEM, and now we are looking at the rolling stock and see if there's any events that are taking place that we can catch with a next-gen firewall with some AI on it. I think that's the other thing I wanted to mention, is that the attackers are using AI and machine learning in great volumes, and we also need to automate our cybersecurity, not only on rolling stock, but also I think in the regular IT department. So combining also the events that we can collect on the trains with the knowledge we already have on the IT side, combining it with our SOC team and automating a lot of stuff, I think that's going to help us as well to mitigate the risks.
Thank you, Mickey. Do you have a view on the rise of AI and machine learning as a kind of threat vector? I guess Dimitri is saying. Do you have is that a trend you're also seeing?
Yes, so indeed it's a trend we're also seeing. We see that attacks become very fast, and you can actually see like when you have 1 0-day being published and how fast it proliferates into being actual threat to companies. And some of them are not really published, but you already start seeing them as a threat. So yeah, indeed, like the response time became much shorter. Like the response time from when you discover a CVE to when it's going to be tested against your environment, it can be hours or less. And that's because you already have those frameworks out there that are automated and are capable of doing all of it very quickly. And I agree with Dimitri. The only possible response to that is having the same level of tooling on your defensive end, and not just on your not just letting the offensive side having it. And it means that you need to plan your entire architecture in an automated way and get answers quickly. You don't have enough time. Like if you have a question about your security posture, you probably need to know how to get the response very quickly and in real time, because it keeps changing. And that's the way of thinking about it.
Thank you. Okay, well, as you can probably imagine, we've had a number of questions from the ERTMS community in Europe, and obviously European train control system is at the vanguard of the next generation of signalling for mainline railways in well, not just in Europe, but in the rest of the world. We've had a question though about the EN 50701 standard, and we talked a bit about standards at the top of the broadcast. Question from Transerb: does the panel feel that this standard is fit for purpose? It's been recommended for use by the European Union Agency for Railways, but it has not been mandated. So does anyone on the panel have a strong view about this new cybersecurity standard in Europe? Dimitri, do you want to start on that?
I started my career in oil and gas, so I'm familiar with the 62443. And the 50701 is, tailor-made to railway, and I think there's a lot of good points in particular segmentation in rolling stock, for example, and having the assets clear. On the other hand, I'm not fully sure if certification is the way to go. But I'm happy to pass on to more experienced colleagues on this topic.
Stefan, do you have
yes, a few words. I will not dare to say it shall apply, when it applies, and how it applies, and so. But just this Senelec paper is considered also as interested by the railway sector. In very recently, just the point I want to point out is that recently in February this year, the European Network and Information Security Agency, the ENISA, published a very interesting paper based on this Senelec 5701, also promoting in this paper, yes, the segmenting, the zoning, and the of the railway system. I am not sure and not convinced that we should go to standard and how fast we should go to standard, but at least we should go to some principles, and also the operators are working together about this principle, and based on typically on this approach about zoning. We have a kind of map. We did a kind of map of the railway system, from the signaling part, the ATP part, to the control and command part. Let's say the traffic supervision and the traffic management system, as well as the public part. Let's for instance also the passenger information. So there are different kind of subsystems, all interacting, all connected. And we mentioned several times how to tackle the risk. The good approach is, of course, to confine, let's say, the different threats to a given zone, and having the evaluating or assessing the impact of the threats regarding the zone. Typically, train control system is a very critical part of the system. And out of this Senelec paper just mentioned in introduction, there were this publication in February from the ENISA.
Okay, so some important reference material there for people to go and look at if they are specialists in rail cybersecurity. Thank you, Stefan. Jack, I'll just turn to you. We've actually had a slightly different question come in from a driver at Trenitalia in Italy, asking, what is the future role of the driver in an ATO world? And I know, obviously, at Swiss Federal Railways, you are looking at mainline ATO. And does the role of the driver, should we be talking about that in the context of cybersecurity as well? Jack, do you have a view on that?
Yes, thanks a lot for the question. Yes, I have a big view about this. We are talking about Tier 1 to Tier 2 or automation grade without driver. But we don't talk about the processes. So I believe the process to drive with passengers, we will still need some drivers the next 20 to 40 years. Absolutely, because we have not the culture from the passenger. We have not the experience to work on it. We can go step by step. We can start to operate in dedicated areas or in shunting or for parking process. We can go much faster for the automation grade 4, but not for the passenger. I believe the driver will be still there for the next 20 to 40 years. Already with these Tier 4 applications, we can reduce the effort, and we can really focus that the driver is really do the work with the passenger. So we increase the productivity for the passenger, and we gain something, and we still have the acceptance of the passenger. We always talking about optimization, but we have to take into account the culture, not only from the member of the railways. We have some passengers, and we have to take this into account too. So I'm not sure that we are so fast in the nominal passenger transportation or goods transportation for a Tier 4 application. For dedicated line, for special application, like we have it today for elevators or what else, it could happen, yes, but not in the bright area.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that's a very important point. Although, the counter argument to that, and I know it's a major problem in some big railway markets like Germany, is what happens if you can't find enough drivers. And I think, and your point about cultural acceptance from passengers, I think that is an issue that has been an issue for some metro networks. That it's been difficult in some cases. A lot of metro networks, like the DLR here in London, they still have a train captain or a customer service agent on board, and I think partly that is to reassure the passengers. So yeah, some important points there. Okay, so we've got about 6 minutes left, so I'm afraid I haven't actually got through. We've had an inundation of questions, which is really fantastic. Thank you to everyone who submitted their questions into the feed, and I apologize if I haven't managed to read them all out. But I think in the last 5 minutes, we'll just wrap up by asking each of our panelists for kind of one key issue or one key talking point that you, the audience, should take away from this discussion. So I just want one key takeaway from each speaker on ATO and cybersecurity. Mickey, I'm going to start with you.
Cool. So I repeated it throughout the talk, but I think that also like Dimitri's point made a lot of sense in terms of how like you communicate it. And like the point is that digitization and automation on the rails systems or signaling, it includes, like we know that it includes a lot of automation. And for that, you need to ensure that your security is automated. I'm saying it because many times the mentality in the industry is about like going through certification schemes that are indeed important and they're super important for safety, but in cybersecurity, the landscape changes much more quickly. So therefore, you need to ensure that you can change as quickly as the landscape changes, and as well as you can respond quickly to attacks or threats as they occur. So that's my point about automation, rail, and cybersecurity here.
Thank you, Mickey. Yeah, that's been a real theme of this discussion, hasn't it? The rapid changing threat landscape in the cyber world. Dimitri, what would your main takeaway be from this discussion?
First of all, I learned a lot, so thank you all. I think if you look at the cybersecurity expertise, there's a shortage in the market, and I think there's a lot of knowledge within the sector, the railway sector, and it could be a good thing to think about some kind of a cyber academy that we train our own IT personnel to become more cyber savvy, and that we set up together with the suppliers, trainings and modules to learn people how to cope with those, ongoing automation that is not going to stop anywhere, and the threat landscape that is moving with a fast pace. So I think we should collaborate within the sector to set up something like, new fresh blood that comes work for us as cyber experts.
Yeah, it's very rare that we do one of these live panel discussions without this question of skills and future training and the skills gap facing the rail industry. That always gets a mention, almost whatever the topic. But that's a very salient point. Thank you, Dimitri. Stefan, just a concluding thought from you, please.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for moderating this session. I would say, in the last word, this cybersecurity is a huge topic that has been invited a few years ago now, and is really there. And it's a matter of risk, and it's a matter also of people and organization. It's not only a matter of technical solution, but it is, of course, also. So do not forget to have your organization and be ready.
Excellent, thank you. And finally, Jack, your takeaway from this session.
Thank you very much. I really want to extend only the sentence of Stefan. So it's an organizational issue. It is a process. That means we start with the process. We have to train our people. We have to do not only once, we have to repeat it every time. And what I miss at the moment is that we are looking for some other business, like for the financial districts. They have a very huge experience in cybersecurity and some protection, and we have really to go to them, look for them, and transfer their solution already to us. But there is a lot of training to do. With everybody in the railway sector has to take into account cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that we haven't discussed other modes of transport, what we could learn, for example, from the aviation sector or other sectors. So that's a really important thought to end this discussion on. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We are almost out of time. So I just want to thank our four panelists for all their contributions. It really has been a fascinating and really insightful discussion that we could carry on much longer. I'd like to thank Silas for their sponsorship of this broadcast. But most of all, I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for watching and for submitting your questions. And once again, I apologise that we haven't had time to get through quite a number of the questions that have come through on the feed. However, the feed will stay open for a couple of hours yet, so please do add any comments into the discussion that you wish to leave us. with, and then this discussion will be available to watch again in on-demand format within the next day or so. And you can find this broadcast and all our other interactive live debates from the past couple of years at railwaygazette.com. But for now, from London, I'd like to wish everyone a really good afternoon. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to you, the viewers. And I'd like to wish you a good afternoon and goodbye.